Buy twowayradios.com. Check, check. Buy twowayradios.com.
It's the Two-Way Radio Show.
And welcome to the Two-Way Radio Show. I'm Rick Savoya.
And I'm Danny Feemster.
And this is the podcast about two-way radios for business and consumer communications. Today we discuss the complex and evolving trade war between the U.S. and China, how it reignited in 2025, and how this and a future trade deal may affect the price of two-way radios in the marketplace. We'll also take some of your questions from our blog, email, and our forum at twowayradioforum.com. Our show is sponsored by twowayradios.com, the source of two-way radios and radio accessories for businesses and consumers since 2002. twowayradios.com, your radio specialists. The U.S.-China trade war has brought a lot of uncertainty for suppliers and users of two-way radios in the first half of 2025. New tariffs were announced in February. There were sharp tariff increases in April, and suddenly, there was the surprise 90-day pause just announced in the past week. Could this latest truce between the two countries lead to a new trade deal, or just delay another clash? How would it affect the affordability and availability of products related to radio communications?
Great question, Rick. This question has consumed me for the better part of the last 6 weeks or so, as I've gotten quite an education on international trade policies and such, which is something I didn't pay much attention to prior, but this is really shaken things up in the last 6 weeks.
Well, let's say shaking things up again, because we did have an issue with this in 2018 through 2020. It was a little touch and go there then, and we covered that in a previous episode of the Two-Way Radio Show, in episode 121, and that was a little far back now, but now it's coming up again. You want to briefly take us through that?
And
sure.
We'll sort of set the stage for where we are now?
Sure. Well, let's see. To recap it briefly, around 2017, 2018, there was this. There has been for a while a bit of a clash between U.S.-China relations in regards to trade overall. And this had to do with a number of different factors. As far as the tariffs were concerned, that was just part of it, but tech disputes and a lot of things related to IP theft and things like that, the U.S. accusing China of stealing IP and stealing technology and things like that, and also issues related to counterfeiting products and that things that could hurt the U.S. Manufacturing as a whole. So between 2018 and 2020, there was this trade war that kind of brewed a little bit. And the two-way radios were on the list of the tariffs that were proposed for, against the goods coming from China. And I think transceivers in particular. I don't want to get into the weeds on that one, but there were
basically, to sum it up, where they ended up in 2018 was adding a few different tiers of tariff levels. Right. The Trump administration added tiers of tariff levels to certain products coming in from China. Two-way radios were in the highest tier of tariffs there, which added 25% to the price of, it added a 25% tariff to the cost of two-way radios coming in from China. In some, depending on the category of two-way radios, but most of the two-way radios we buy were in the 25% tariff range from 2018.
Mm-hmm. And once again, we did cover this in episode 121. If you want to go back, you can listen to it to get a little historical perspective on this. I think that the title was Tariffs on Chinese Two-Way Radios. That was the title at the time. Okay, so since then, there was a trade agreement that was set up, and it was a phase one was called a Phase 1 trade agreement, and it was signed on January 15th of 2020. And you can get the details. I'll leave a link in the show notes to the details of that agreement for this episode of the podcast. I'll put a link in there. So there was a few years of relative calm from those years since then, 2021 through 2024. But the tensions began to grow again, and one of the things that were in contention, of course, we had COVID happened, and that sort of affected the situation quite a bit in a negative way. And one of the clauses in this agreement was that China agreed to increase U.S. exports by $200 billion. And it didn't really happen the way that it had been planned or agreed to. Danny, you could probably take us through a little bit of that.
Yeah, that was part of the Phase 1 agreement. China agreed as part of this Phase 1 agreement to purchase an additional $200 billion of product from the United States. And they ended up only purchasing like 58% of that number. And I think there's some back and forth on why that was. China would say, well, the whole economy shut down because of COVID right after that. So they've got something of an excuse. And then the pledge expired December 31st, 2021, which was kind of still in the middle of all the COVID situation. So I guess the Phase 1 agreement was just abandoned, wasn't enforced according to the Trump administration, it wasn't enforced by the Biden administration. So it was just kind of abandoned. Now my take is where we are currently, everything stayed pretty much the same. Biden kept the original Trump era tariffs. Mm-hmm. He did add a couple of tariffs on some specific things, like 100% tariffs on EVs and 50% tariffs on solar panels, which that's very specific stuff, I think, to protect certain industries in the U.S.
Yeah,
but for the most part, things with the new Trump administration coming in are where he left off in 2020. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. So basically what he was doing was kind of picking things back up and trying to sort of rework this whole agreement, I guess, in a way. But here we are in 2025, and here's what has happened since then. New tariffs were added in addition to any existing tariffs. I think that they had another 10% tariff placed on Chinese imports, and some of that was fentanyl related.
In February, the Trump administration started first of all, it seems like the Trump administration is intent on adding tariffs. Trump campaigned on tariffs as a way to raise revenue and encourage manufacturing to return to the United States. So Trump is a big fan of tariffs. I think the question that we had coming into the Trump administration was, how committed to tariffs is he? Like, what kind of tariff level are we looking at? Because he'd floated 60% tariffs on China when he was campaigning. That seemed unrealistic to me at the time, but after where we were for the last month, I don't know.
Now, before we go any farther, let's just point out this is not a political podcast. Not politically, This is not a political, discussion that we're having here. We're strictly talking about the situation with the tariffs and how it affects radios and other communications products. So, be that as it may, it's just simply what's happening, what's happened, and what's happening now. That's all.
Oh yeah, I give everyone the benefit of the doubt that I assume these guys know a lot more about this stuff than I do. I'm just sitting here trying to understand it, and I'm not smart enough to do that most of the time. And
you're smarter than me, so there you go.
I wouldn't go that far. The Trump administration came in and they started out wanting to do something about the fentanyl problem that we have in the United States. So he put 25% tariffs on on Canada and Mexico, fentanyl related, and a 10% tariff on China across the board for fentanyl related issues, trying to get these countries to do something about what he claims is allowing fentanyl to come into the United States.
And then from there, it started to escalate here. China retaliated with up to 15% tariff on some farm products from the U.S.
Yep, they responded with some industry-specific tariffs, which we then retaliated with a doubling to 20% on the fentanyl-related tariffs. And that was still February, I believe. So we had the period of February to April where the additional tariffs were 20% from China due to fentanyl-related issues. And it's important to say, a lot of times on the news, we hear that the tariffs that Trump has added mentioned as the tariff, but these are additional tariffs. It's important to say because on two-way radios, we already had the original, which I think they call Section 301 tariffs. I may have that number wrong, but these are the original tariffs from 2018. So with a 20% fentanyl tariff and the original 25% tariff on two-way radios, we would be at 45% tariffs. This is in February to early April timeframe before the Liberation Day tariffs took effect.
Then the Liberation Day tariffs took effect on April 2nd. And so then there was another back and forth here. China matched by adding across the board 34% tariff on U.S. goods. Then the U.S.
We need to state the Liberation Day tariff amount from Trump was 34% on China, which would be an across the board tariff on all goods from China, 34%. That's in addition to the 20% fentanyl related tariff. So we were at 54%. 54%. China didn't match the fentanyl tariff. China only did the specific farm product tariffs before that. So what China matched was the 34% Liberation Day tariff. Okay. And then it just became tit for tat for a while.
It's just a whole tit for tat thing. Here's another 50% from China for 84% additional tariffs on U.S. goods.
It went U.S. 34%, China matched 34%. U.S. added another 50%, China retaliated another 50%. Trump went to 125%, and then China matched it to 125%. So where that landed was 145%, which is the 125% plus the 20% fentanyl. So U.S. is at 145, China is at 125. And that had the effect of pausing all trade from China for the most part.
Yeah, it had a very, very profound and immediate effect on trade from China. This pretty much brought the imports of a lot of things, including radios and many other products from China, just to a grinding halt.
Exactly. Now there was, I guess, a little bit of backtracking during April where Trump carved out an exception for like smartphones and computers. Yeah. And then China sort of did the same thing where they exempted some computer equipment, I believe, from their 125% tariff. So, but as far as we're concerned in the two-way radio world, we were looking at 145% tariffs minimum and probably 170% tariffs on handheld radios and mobile radios.
So pretty much, and we have heard from some of our suppliers and our vendors have talked about, well, there are going to be price increases. There's going to be some issues with supply and things like that. We've heard from some of them about it. It made everybody very nervous and very concerned about what was going to happen next. And I've we've heard rumblings from other, from another dealer or two about how could be a real issue for their business. It could just maybe just decimate their businesses. So this was very serious stuff here, and on both sides, because watching and listening to what was coming out of China, it's really hurt their economy as well. It's been very damaging to their economy. So there's good reason for both parties to come back to the table and say, hey, let's kind of rethink this. So and that's basically what has just happened.
Well, maybe we should take our listeners a little bit more inside what was going on with us during this month where there was so much turmoil.
Mm-hmm.
And it was extremely disruptive because so much of our business, so many products that we sell come from China. Either we bring them in directly from China or we're buying from a manufacturer that has products made in China. That's a huge percentage of our product. I would say over 80% of the products that we sell come from China.
Or are come from countries where they source a lot of their products from China. A lot of their components and things. It's not just a China factor.
It's difficult too to you don't really want to place an order with these types, even if there's a product like accessories or something where maybe you could live with a price increase, and or maybe customers would pay the price increase, but you really don't want to place an order for product and then have these tariffs go away a couple of weeks later, and now you're sitting on inventory that you've paid double for or triple for. So it just brings so much uncertainty into everything. So it's difficult to make any decision. So we had basically reduced our marketing and our advertising and stopped placing orders for Chinese products that we bring in directly. And at the same time, we're getting emails every day from distributors and manufacturers for other products that we buy, saying you're going to have price increases, or there's going to be a surcharge, a tariff surcharge. Several manufacturers went with the tariff surcharge approach, where any orders placed during this time period is going to be an extra X percent on top. And
well, we've already had to raise prices, on a few items on the site, and hopefully that won't last forever. But we did wind up having to do that somewhat already.
Yeah, we also have products that come from Japan. ICOM, Kenwood, for example, are Japanese. So at least there was a sort of a backtrack on all countries other than China initially. Like there were the Liberation Day tariffs that had a high tariff amount on many countries. But then shortly thereafter, maybe a week or two later, there was a 90-day pause on all that, on all countries other than China. So all of those tariffs went to 10%, and 10% is most of the 10% is probably going to be absorbable in most cases, either by the manufacturer or by us as a reseller. So China was the remaining problem after that happened.
Now we're saying was because since then, as of May 12th, we suddenly had an agreement or for a temporary pause between the U.S. and China in this trade war. And this has brought about somewhat of a relief from all this tit-for-tat tariff war. And that's where we are right now. It's sort of there's a little bit of a pause. There's a little bit of quiet there. It's kind of like you're hitting the eye of the storm, right? And where everything gets quiet and you're just kind of see what happens next. But This is potentially a good thing for the time being, because both sides agreed to pause all the new tariffs for 90 days. And in so doing, both sides agreed to roll back April's tariffs unilaterally by 115% temporarily beginning May 14th, which means that the additional tariffs that the U.S. have go down to 30%, and the Chinese tariffs go down to 10%. And in so doing, for the next 90 days, that's where they've agreed to set these tariffs. Now, both countries plan to resume high-level trade negotiations, and the aim here, the goal, is to get a long-term deal between the two countries, and then the problem more or less solved. Now, we say, this is tentative because who knows, based on what's happened so far, who knows what could happen next? We don't know. I mean, this is all contingent on reaching a more permanent trade deal. And, I'm not trying to be negative about it, but I'm just trying to be realistic here, saying that, okay, just because they've rolled this back temporarily doesn't mean problem solved and everything is fine and hunky-dory. It just means we've got a little bit of a reprieve. We can breathe a little bit and see what happens next.
Yeah, and the place that we are now it's not like this never happened. I mean, the place that we're at now with 30% additional tariffs, that's still significant, and it's probably going to result in price increases to products, because you have to remember, with the 30%, that is additional tariffs on top of the 25% that was there originally. So with a two-way radio, that is 55% tariff. So,
which is still not exactly a low figure here.
It's not. It is a significant figure. It would definitely impact the selling price of a two-way. We're not making 50%, 55% on the products that we sell from China. So we would be losing money if we didn't take the tariff into account. But the other thing is, it seems like, based on what members of the Trump administration have said, 10% is the minimum this is going to be. The place that we are now is a 10% tariff on Liberation Day tariff, I guess you could say, plus a 20% fentanyl related tariff. So that's probably as low as it's going to get. I imagine, based on what they've said in negotiations with other countries, these tariffs are most likely going to go up. I believe that they have capped it at the Liberation Day number of 34%. I think they've said at the end of this 90-day agreement, if no agreement is made, it goes back to the 34%, not to the 145%. So that's good, but that's still, with two-way radios, you're looking at about 80% if it went up to that number.
Well, of course, there are some exceptions. I guess you're able to file for some exceptions to some of those things on some goods. I don't think that applies to radios at all.
Well, I think they have certain categories that they have exempted, like with the smartphone exemption and computer exemption. They listed, there's a code, a harmonized tariff code is what they call it, that every product in the world gets categorized into, and each of these codes has a tariff rate. So there's some categories that you could probably wedge a two-way radio into, but it's not, that are exempted, but it's not the ideal category for a two-way radio. So customs would, from what I understand, not agree to use that HT code for two-way radios.
You know what? I kind of feel sorry for the guy who has to sit down and calculate all these rates and put them up somewhere, and on the list. Because they have to go. They're probably still busy going through the last round of tariffs and setting those rates, and now they have to. Oh well, I got to go back and undo this. And
I think I saw an interview with Howard Lutnick,
Mhm.
and he was talking about how many pages of just tariff rates you have to go through, and you have to do it for every single country that they're trying to do trade agreements with. This is going to take a long time to go through, but I do think we got some good news out of this pause.
Yeah,
At least the U.S. and China are talking,
that's the important thing.
and well, I guess it depends on your goal. There are some people that I've heard from or seen talking on X about how they wanted a complete decoupling from China and how it's a great thing that we're not buying anything from China. So if that's your position, you're probably not happy to see this, but that's not my position. I think that we need some trade with China, and just stopping immediately would be devastating.
Well, there are reasons why we can't just stop cold turkey like that and not do anything, and the primary reason is because we really don't have the manufacturing infrastructure set up to compensate for that right now. And that's where part of this problem lies in the first place. I guess some people think, well, all we have to do is just stop doing trade with China. We can just make all this stuff ourselves. Well, it's easier said than done when you don't have to do the manufacturing of it yourself. If you understand how the manufacturing sector works, you really have to have the infrastructure in place to do that. You have to have the tools, you have to have the factories, and the most important thing is you have to have the people that are trained and who are able to do this sort of work and are willing to do this work. And if you don't have any of that, that kind of sets you back right there.
That's exactly right. I mean, it's not an overnight thing. Mm-hmm. Moving manufacturing to the U.S. is maybe a great goal. I would say.
I'm all for that.
We should encourage some manufacturing to come back to the U.S., especially in specific industries where maybe national security is involved, or things that if something, God forbid, ever happened between us and China, you don't want to be in a situation where we can't get pharmaceuticals, or you don't want critical infrastructure relying on another country.
Absolutely,
but
absolutely.
Certain things, however, are, ramping up manufacturing for every product that we currently get from China is not something that would happen anytime soon. It would take quite a while to get there. But I think the good news is, and we didn't know this early, but I think the Trump administration has said the goal is not to decouple from China. Mm-hmm. And early in this process, I didn't know what the goal was. They weren't really clear if the goal was a complete decoupling from China. Like, are you happy that there's no trade happening, or do you want some manufacturing from China to be imported into the U.S.? To what level?
Well, I always thought the goal was primarily to not so much decouple, but more so to kind of encourage more U.S. manufacturing so that we could kind of stand on our own, especially if things went south around the world and something happened and we were suddenly finding ourselves in a situation where we had to manufacture. Because right now we are not in that situation. We do not have that advantage. So I think being a little bit more, we don't have to be totally independent from everybody, but to be able to hold our own as far as manufacturing and trade is concerned, I think is very important.
Well, with across the board tariffs, I think it's harder to argue that you're trying to get specific industries brought back into the U.S. Mm-hmm. With an across the board tariff looks to me more like you're trying to create revenue. Mm-hmm. But to create revenue, the tariff has to be low enough so that trade isn't completely halted. So I don't know. I think maybe it makes sense that specific industries are going to be brought back to the U.S. and they're probably going to do something to encourage pharmaceuticals and weapons manufacturing and rare earth mining and refining. I mean, those are some industries that need to be brought back to the U.S. So maybe something else needs to be done to encourage that. Other than just a 34% tariff.
Considering all that, what do you think would be the possible outcome for this whole tariff situation? What do you think might happen next? I mean, we speculate. Speculation is what we do best on this show.
Yeah, I have no insight. My guess would be the outcome is that tariffs wind up somewhere around that 30% Liberation Day number from the U.S. Maybe they get China to do something that looks like they're working on the fentanyl problem, and you can eliminate that 20% fentanyl tariff. And we end up with around 25, 30% additional tariff on top of everything that happened 4 years ago. So that will be my guess is that the fentanyl tariff goes away at some point. We have a across the board tariff somewhere around the 34% Liberation Day number. And that's where we end up sitting for a while.
I see them eventually signing an agreement somewhat similar, not exactly, but somewhat similar to the one that they drew up in 2020. The thing is that, again, here's my concerns. My concern is whether or not China would inevitably hold to that agreement or not. I have to say I'm a little apprehensive that looking back historically, that's not something they've really willingly have done or something that they would do on their own. And if they found a way to kind of slide out of it, they probably would. And I would have to say that I'm not sure that an agreement with China would be long lasting. It might, and maybe I'm being real pessimistic about it, but I don't know. I don't think that in the long term this is going to completely solve or completely balance trade between the U.S. and China, particularly if there are any other skirmishes, like maybe what's been happening out there in the South China Sea and things like that. It's just, there are a lot of worrisome things that happen in the world that some of them are political, some of them are not, but that can change things on a dime. And I don't know. I think it remains to be seen, but I don't know that it, as a long-term solution, I don't really see this becoming a trade balance per se.
I don't know. I think that we will find an agreement. Maybe I'm being optimistic here.
I'm being pessimistic. I'm just trying to be realistic about this, not pessimistic.
No, we both would say we're trying to be realistic. But I think your slides to the pessimistic side, or maybe I'm sliding to the optimistic side. I think that it's one thing. It's very good that we have so much dependence on each other's economies. Like we see over the last month that the U.S. and China are incredibly dependent on each other. And if trade stops like it did for the last month, you get reports of how affected China's economy has been. And I think the Trump administration realizes that we were looking at a pretty bad storm over the next couple of months, as you see container ships aren't coming in and empty shelves, things like that. It's not something that either country wants. So perhaps the dependence that we have on each other economically would prevent things militarily from getting out of hand. And if you're in a situation where you're not dependent on each other economically, then I think the ramifications of military action are less.
One thing that I would like to reiterate is that these tariffs, the ones that have been enacted and the ones that might be set going forward, they don't just affect the radio imports from China radios, but they can affect the import of components that are used in radios made or manufactured by other countries that we purchased as well. So that is a factor.
Well, I don't think that's going to be so much of a factor because, like, let's say, for example, you buy a radio that's made in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
If that radio that's made in Japan is using some Chinese components, the radio is still going to be considered made in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll get tariffed on that radio at the Japan rate, not on the China rate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the thing. If we were, let's say, for example, a U.S. company is manufacturing radios itself,
mm-hmm.
and they import components from China directly to use on the circuit board or to use in the radio, well, that would incur a China tariff on those electrical components.
Here's another question. What if a Chinese radio is purchased in the U.S. from a dealer located in another country? Is that some sort of a loophole, or does the tariff still apply?
The tariff still applies because when you import the product from another country, like let's say you buy from a dealer in the United Kingdom and they're selling you a radio made in China, when they ship it to the U.S., they have to include an invoice that includes the country of origin for the product they're sending in. And that country of origin would say China if that's where the product was manufactured. So that's not a loophole.
Well, you had a couple of other points you want to make, a couple of other questions you wanted to bring up.
One thing that I think we should bring up is the de minimis exception. Previously, this de minimis exception is something that the Trump administration eliminated, and that would allow goods, I believe goods under $800 to be brought into the United States at zero tariff. This allowed Chinese websites like AliExpress and Temu and Shein. Those are the big ones that you hear about. Mm-hmm. People in the U.S. could order from those sites and they would ship directly to the customer in the U.S. and no tariff would apply.
Wouldn't that be quite a big loophole there?
I guess that's what the Trump administration thought because they eliminated the de minimis loophole.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's going to also be a disruption because I know a lot of U.S. consumers were ordering from sites like AliExpress and Temu, for example. Mm-hmm. So we'll see. I believe that I heard those sites stopped selling to U.S. customers entirely. They stopped shipping to the U.S. I don't know if that's changed now that we've got this de-escalation, mm-hmm. But that would be interesting to see.
Well, what's the other item that you wanted to bring up?
Another question I see a lot from our customers is it realistic to manufacture radios in the U.S.? Because some people see what's going on and they say, well, no problem. Just make the radios in the U.S.
No, that's a good question.
Simple. Just make the radios here. And I'm not a manufacturer. I don't know how to make a radio in the U.S., but I can tell you it is complicated because so much of the supply chain comes from China anyway, mm-hmm. and it's very expensive because of all the equipment that would have to be purchased. Or if you don't buy the equipment, you have to outsource the production of things like metal components or plastic components and circuit board assembly and things like that. And having all that done in the United States cost a lot more than you would assume it would. And at the end of the day, you've still got to compete with $16 Baofungs.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
I mean, even if you were selling as many of your U.S. made radios as Baofeng sells $16 radios, it may still cost $100 to the end user may have to pay $100 to buy one of those radios, and that's being optimistic.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's also the catch that you could invest so much into ramping up production of a radio, the design and the putting together the factory and sourcing all the materials and everything like that. And you could make this thing, and you can make a whole bunch of them, and they might not sell at all. There is that risk that you'd be sinking all that money into developing a product that no one would buy that particular product, or it might not sell as well as a Baofeng. And then you're in the hole, really.
Well, that's exactly right. You don't know. Let's say you've put a lot of money, a lot of investment into building a radio, and in order to make any kind of profit on this radio, you have to sell it for $100 each. And I'm just making up numbers here.
And you have to sell so many of them to get the money back.
And keep in mind, I'm just making up numbers. I have no idea what the break-even cost on a radio would be. And like you said, it would be dependent on the volume that you're doing. Mm-hmm. But let's say you look at, well, they're selling this many Baofengs on Amazon, so I can count on selling that many of my radio. Well, you're still competing with the $16 Baofeng. So you may only sell 5% of that number or less because it's so much more expensive.
Yeah.
So it's a gamble for sure. And then you spent maybe millions of dollars getting the equipment, or if you choose to outsource the production of those components, now that increases your cost by, probably 200-300%.
So the bottom line in here is, what might happen next, and what do you think will be the ultimate outcome here with the tariffs?
Well, maybe I think, like I said earlier, that eventually you'll see this tariff rate stabilize and you'll see trade continue with China. I think that probably somewhere around the 30% number would be my guess. I think maybe you'll see some people try manufacturing in the U.S. Mm-hmm. I'm very interested to see how that goes. But it is risky. Like you never know. What if the next administration comes in and it's taken you a couple of years to get your manufacturing in place, and then all this is rolled back by the next administration?
Yeah.
You never know.
Well, that's basically what happened last time, right? Everything just
no. The Biden administration actually kept the tariffs from the first Trump administration in place.
They just didn't enforce China's end of the deal.
Yeah, China was supposed to buy a certain amount, like $200 billion worth of additional goods from the U.S., and they only got to 58% of that. So, yeah, that wasn't enforced. They say they have an excuse because of COVID.
Yeah. All right. Well, any other thoughts or discussion on the current or possible future tariff situation?
All of this is fluid. We could record this episode today and everything change by the time we get it out.
That's true. It could be.
Get the editing done quickly.
Yeah. And if you want a good price on a radio, get it now.
We are placing orders again at this tariff rate where we're at after the May 12th agreement. We are rolling again. You may see some price increases, but it is not nearly as bad as what we were looking at a month ago.
For the moment.
For the moment.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have some comments and questions from our blog, email, and forum at twowayradiosforum.com. Our first one comes from Delusional. They're asking about the GXT 67 and the GXT 1000, talking about privacy code compatibility. And Delusional says, about to buy a pair of Midland GXT 67s. Have one question, then it's a buy. Are the preset privacy codes used on channels 23 through 50 identical on both the GXT67 and the GXT1000X? Are they compatible on those channels straight out of the box? And that's from Delusional. And I can answer that one. The very short answer is yes. A longer answer is there's an easy way to figure that out. You just download the user manual. You can download the user manual for both radios because we sell them both by twowayradios.com. And you can download the user manual for each one of those radios for the GXT1000, the GXT67 Pro, and they're listed on charts towards the back end of each manual, and you can look and compare them on those channels. However, the easiest way to do this, really the easiest way, is just to simply go to our blog article titled "How Midland's Extra Channels Work." That's been updated. We keep that updated pretty frequently, periodically, I guess you could say, which lists the extra channels and the tone or code for each channel, the one that each channel uses. And I just updated it again last month to accommodate the GXT3000 and the GXT67 Pro. So that's a good, quick way to check. Our next one is actually an email, and this is from Rocket Man. His name's John. John says, "Hi, guys. I am so happy I found your website. I have learned so much about GMRS radios. I love the Radio 101 quick videos as well as the long-form TWRS episodes. Just made a purchase today for the Mellowave Bandit. Keep up the great work." And that's from John. Thank you, John. Appreciate that.
It's very nice.
Yeah. Our next one is from Matthew, and he is responding to our last episode, episode 201, about the KG-XS20H tri-band ham radio. Matthew says, "I always wonder when tri-band radios like this, or even HTs, do not, in this day and age, have displays that show all three bands. This is a nice radio, though. I like Ocean." And that's from Matthew. Got any comment on that one?
Very, very nice comment. It did make me remember something we should probably announce in this episode. We launched the XS20H, and I think I said in the episode that they weren't going to last long. And I was right. They were gone in about 24 hours. Much thanks to Not a Rubicon, who put a video out on the radio, and
hey, we helped.
They're all gone, 24 hours. And we stopped accepting back orders for them and had no estimate for when they would be back in. And we've gotten a lot of emails going, "Hey, what's going on? I want this radio." Well, because of the tariff situation, we had no idea when our next shipment was going to get here. We went over this all in the last episode, but anyway, we have a new shipment on the way. So probably, here's the thing. I don't know what's going to happen with shipping, because I imagine every other country or every other company in the country has placed an order with China at the same time we did.
Well, that's something we didn't cover in the main discussion. It's like this sudden surge in orders. So that's going to clog things up.
Yeah. Now these are coming in by air, but I still imagine that shipping is going to be backed up tremendously for goodness, probably weeks, probably months.
I didn't even consider that.
I would think it's going to get crazy. Normally we would have these things in around a week or so, since we're shipping them in air. But plan on 2 or 3 weeks, I would say. We'll have some KG-XS20Hs back in stock. We are accepting back orders for them now, and I expect to have a lot of back orders. If it's a radio you're waiting on, you may want to go ahead and get it on back order so that you're guaranteed one when we get them.
And by the way, just to reiterate what we mentioned in the last episode, if you really want to sign up and get the latest on the back order situation, you can sign up for the back order notifications. Just go to the XS20H product page at bytwowayradios.com and click on the sign up for back order notifications link, and just put in your email address, and you'll get those notifications as soon as it arrives. You'll be the first to know after us.
There you go.
Our next one comes from Bob, and Bob is also responding to the Ocean KG XS20H. And Bob wants to know, hi, is this a super heterodyne radio? And that's from Bob. No, it's not. It's Bob. It's the XS20H and the XS20G are both direct conversion models. And by the way, plugging the blog again, you can reference a whole chart listing all of the Ocean radios. I don't know if everyone out there is aware of this, but go to our blog at by2wayradios.com and look up, just type in Ocean super heterodyne. I guess that'll do it. And it'll pull up the blog article with a chart listing the receiver type of all the Ocean radios that we carry. So there you go. And our last one here comes from Sean, our good friend Sean. And Sean says, I listened to this podcast while cutting weeds this morning. Good episode. I really like my XS20G, so this amateur version looks really good. The main reason I like the GMRS model is I can plug it into a power outlet in my vehicle and use it on high power. The 20-ish watts give you a lot of power as compared to an HT, yet the lower current draw allows you to use a power outlet, making the radios very portable. Even though I don't spend a lot of time on the ham bands, the XS20H is tempting. Every Ocean radio I have has been somewhere between good to outstanding. Thanks for another good podcast. And that's from Sean.
That's a great point about the portability. I love that.
Yeah, I do too. And I think I made a similar point about the XS20G in that episode as well. Well, I guess that does it for our comments and questions in this episode. Send in your comments and questions for Danny or myself to show@by2wayradios.com. If you want to know more about today's topic or about two-way radios in general, check out our forum discussions at twowayradiosforum.com. You can subscribe to the Two-Way Radio Show directly from our website at twowayradioshow.com or hear it almost anywhere you can find a podcast. And you can subscribe by email, as a reminder, for those who are listening for the first time. Just go to the website at twowayradioshow.com, click on subscribe by email on the Two-Way Radio Show podcast page, enter your email address, and you'll get the latest episode of the Two-Way Radio Show as soon as it's released. Well, Danny, before we go, any final comments?
No, I think we got it.
All right. Well, today's show is sponsored by twowayradios.com. Whether you're searching for two-way radios for general consumer or business use, Two-Way Radios can help you find the best solution for your needs. Give us a call at 1-800-584-1445 or enter our live chat at twowayradios.com. Well, everyone, as always, thanks for listening and watching. And until next time, for the Two-Way Radio Show, I'm Rick Savoya.
And I'm Danny Feemster.
And we're out.